cut this short. We're gonna ring Matt now, and then we'll carry back on with this after we've spoke to Matt. So I think it'll be interesting to go into it a little bit more because it was obviously such a hot topic last week. So Matt's online now, so let's give him a ring, and hopefully
Super.
we'll get our first interview up and running. So again, as always, I'll take the first half, then I'll pass him over to yourself. Right,
Excellent.
just add him into the call. Right, I'm just adding him in now.
All right. Waiting on the law.
Right, here we go. Hi Matt, you okay?
Hang on, I gotta get headphones on. Let's see.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Brilliant. You're on with myself, Ray, and you're also on with my co-host, Patrick.
Hey, how you doing this afternoon, Matt?
I'm good, Patrick. How are you?
Fantastic. Great
Well,
to speak with you.
I'll jump straight in then. Obviously, first of all, I just want to say a big thank you for agreeing to come on the show. We're really pleased to get you on the show.
Certainly.
So, jump straight in. When I first started following the sport, I remember one of the first fights I saw when I first discovered mixed martial arts was both your fights with Phil Baroni. I know it's going back quite a while, but I just wanted to they were obviously two of the first fights I saw, and they were obviously such crazy fights. What was it like? What was Phil Baroni like?
Well, he's a very tough competitor. He was, strong kid, explosive athlete. At that time, I don't think. I just read an article recently that he didn't take his career too seriously, started partying a lot, and wasted his youth. But at that time, he was a very tough athlete, very explosive.
Obviously, he was known for his out of ring antics as well, and obviously his talking. Was that something that just didn't bother you, or was that something that did get in? Was he able to get into your head?
No, actually, I thought it was just fun. It was to banter back and forth and have fun. I got to have that kind of fun with a couple of guys. I remember Lee Murray. We never actually got in the ring and competed against each other, but when I was in London after one of my fights with Mark Weir, we got in the ring and bantered back and forth. But come to find out, he was really serious about it, and apparently he's a pretty good gangster. So you don't, I guess you don't play around with those guys.
No, well, he's in prison now, isn't he?
That's what I understand.
Yeah, he's in prison for a massive robbery. Go back a little bit before that, because obviously before you were known for MMA, you've obviously got a history in wrestling as well, and I know you represented America in the Olympics. What was it like representing your country in the Olympics?
Well, I'm a pretty proud American, a patriot. So anytime I can represent my country in the Olympic Games, the World Championships, or any major competition, it's a proud moment. It's something that I enjoy doing.
And how easy was it for you to make the transition from from wrestling to mixed martial arts?
Simple. I mean, it's the same sport. It's just you get a punch and kick guys instead of just grapple.
And were you somebody who kind of studied the game? And because I remember one of your fights, one of your earlier fights with Ricardo Almeida, and I remember you winning because he got disqualified because he kept on throwing the up kicks. So you obviously studied the game, and you kind of you knew the rules by the book kind of thing, and you played by those rules. Is that how you took it, looked at it as a sport rather than as a fight? I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
That's a tough question, because yes, I studied the sport. I studied, what I'm doing, and I understood the rules. Ricardo also knew the rules, and he was getting his ass kicked, and I think it looked better to say I lost by disqualification than, I got beat up for 3 rounds. He was tough, though. I was having a hard time finishing him because of his toughness, but he wasn't winning the fight. He was down on all cards on all 3 rounds. So he knew that the easiest way to get out of that fight was to kick me in the head again on the ground. So he did that. But as far as taking this as a sport, I mean, that's how I train. That's how I prepare. like a professional athlete. But when the cage door closes, it's not really a sport anymore. It's a fight. In a sporting environment, for sure. You have a referee and there's judges and there's, you got fans watching, but you can't get into it and treat it like it is a sport when you're in there because it's a violent sport for sure. So you got to treat it more like a fight.
Yeah, it definitely is that. And I remember that fight because it wasn't one, was it? He threw continuous the same foul, and he was warned a few times, wasn't he, before he was
Yeah,
disqualified.
it was very clear. If you do this technique again, you will be disqualified. Okay, so then he hit me again with the kick. So
Yeah,
he was very clear on the penalties.
he couldn't cope with your wrestling at all, was he? Because obviously he was known for his Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he's obviously very good at his jiu-jitsu, but he just couldn't cope with your wrestling at all, from what I remember.
That's how I remember it, and it was a while ago, but my memory is pretty good on that stuff. I haven't taken too many shots to the head.
You talked a little bit about fighting at Cage Rage. What was it like fighting? Obviously, I'm from the UK. What was it like fighting for Cage Rage and fighting on the UK scene?
I thought they had a great show. I fought, I think, just twice there, maybe three times. I know I fought Mark Weir and Nino Shimbri both there. I think that might have been my only two times fighting in Cage Rage, but it was a well-run organization. It was a beautiful venue out at Wembley. I think the place held about 5,000 people, and it was always full. They partnered up with Elite XC, and I think that was the beginning of their end. The two promoters were doing great events and putting on good shows. I don't know what their financials were, if they were finding a way to make money or not, and maybe that's why they ultimately tried to partner up with Elite XC. But the thing that Elite XC had going on just seemed like they kind of ran that into the ground pretty quick.
Yeah, I think they were paying out too much and not bringing the money back in where they'd cover their expenses, from what I remember.
So you got to run business. You got to bring in more than you spend.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you've been around the sport for a long time, and it's fair to say the sport has grown from what it was when you first started to what it was now. But you fought some of the biggest names in the sport. Is there any fights that stand out to you as favourite fights or favourite opponents?
Favorite fights, favorite opponents. I mean, one of my favorite guys in the sport, Pat Miletich. I got an opportunity to fight him. He was a former world champion. If I had to say favorite fights, favorite guys. One of my all-time favorite fights, though, was against somebody that isn't one of my favorite fighters, and that would be Rampage Jackson. I felt like I was completely robbed in the decision in a show that was just promoting him and really getting the marketing behind Rampage. And I felt that it was pretty clear and obvious that I won that decision. Went for more finishing attempts, did more damage in the fight, but that was still a fun fight.
I remember that fight. That was obviously for WFA. They didn't last very long, but I thought you won that fight as well. It was a very exciting fight, but I thought that you'd win that fight. But like you say, it was one of those they were building on him, like you said, wasn't it? What was it like fighting Fedor Emelianenko? Just because he's obviously he's become such a big name within MMA. What was it like fighting him?
Honestly, fighting anybody there's not much difference other than, in Fedor's case, it happened to be the best heavyweight in the world in his hometown, and I was up two weight classes, so I had the odds kind of stacked against me going into that fight, and I still felt like I had a pretty deep, uh, a big overhand left and cut him. Got body lock and wanted to take him all the way to the ground. He was able to use the ropes and the rules to his advantage, and the referees didn't make the big calls, so he ended up on top on the takedown. And for a big man, he's very agile, very slick in the submission games.
Do you think I remember that fight? And do you think if he hadn't have grabbed the ropes, obviously he shouldn't have been doing that. Do you think that fight could have gone completely differently?
The what ifs, sure. I mean, I could what if that fight all day long, but it that's competition. That's what happens, you know. I mean, you use the rules to your advantage. You get away with as many rope grabs as you can until you can't. I made the mistake of trying to drag him off the ropes instead of just hanging out and being patient. And I think I've got lost because just like I would tell one of my athletes is, you can't blame the judges, you can't blame your opponent. No matter what happens, you've got to win fights. I mean, that's your responsibility.
No, that's fair enough. I've got one last question to ask you. Then I'm going to pass you over to Patrick. What I wanted to ask you, what was it like training with Extreme Couture? Because obviously at one time, in the earlier days, they were one of the biggest camps at the time. It's still a big camp now, obviously, but at one time they were one of the biggest camps. What was it like training with them?
Well, I trained with Randy. We started Team Quest together, so training at Randy's gym in Vegas wasn't a big stretch. It was Randy and some of his new guys from his gym. Beautiful facility out there. The one thing that struck me for such a great gym and a great facility and with Randy's name behind it was at the time they didn't have a lot of high level trainers and coaches, and most of their athletes trained there. They sparred together, but they went elsewhere in Vegas is a big city with a lot of coaches, a lot of fighters. But what struck me was odd was that they all went elsewhere to get their coaching, whether it was groundwork or their stand-up. And then they all kind of came together at Randy's gym to just do their sparring together.
Right, I know Patrick's eager to go. So you ready to jump in, Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ray, and Matt. Thanks a lot for coming on. You're a true legend of athletic competition. It's a real pleasure to speak with you this afternoon.
Oh.
I wanted to ask you. Well, you actually just had your first podcast, Inside Coaching, on your website, CoachMattLindland.com. You had Dave Avalon on, and I thought it was a great debut. What can we expect from the podcast and yourself in the future?
Wow, thanks for asking about that, and thanks for following it. Well, actually, the next guest I'm going to have is Jonathan Snowden. We got that scheduled for today, and will probably be released before the end of the week. We're trying to do one podcast a week on my blog, CoachMattLindland.com. And we're going to talk to Jonathan about his recent book, Shooters, the Roots of Pro Wrestling, and the connection between pro wrestling and MMA, and the similarities and all the great athletes of the past, just kind of the history of the sport. And I think a lot of the younger guys, this generation of fighters, don't understand that, MMA is not really that new. It was pro wrestling in its earlier days was actually shoot wrestling. They were fighting for real. What happened was they were getting big name fighters, and they couldn't compete every week. They were getting injured, and we're seeing that with UFC. Even when these guys are putting 3 months in between fights, they're getting hurt, and they're getting injured. I think you just talked about Dan's knee injury, and
yeah.
But, those things are happening. So these guys started doing works, and that's where the pro wrestling as we know it today is kind of emerged from. But so we're going to talk to Jonathan, find out a little bit more about his research and his book and what he's done.
Well, that's very cool. Definitely look forward to hearing that. Since we're on the subject of wrestling, and of course you and Ray touched a little bit on your wrestling background, on your podcast, I heard you say you would wished you would learn certain grappling moves early in your career. Do you think that your involvement in MMA and techniques learned in that sport helped you on that runs toward the silver in the 2000 Olympics?
Well, I was very diligent in studying my craft. Always have been since I started this sport. But one of the biggest things later in my wrestling career was I wasn't making big gains. I was making small incremental gains, but at the highest level, really that's all that matters. That's the difference between, medaling and not medaling. That's probably the difference between, winning the gold and winning the silvers. And is how much time you're putting in the small incremental gains. When I switched over to studying every aspect of fighting besides just wrestling, the grappling, the new style, adding the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and adding all the hook wrestling and just learning the striking part and really understanding that it's all the same sport. The similarities, and I have an article on that blog. It's called "It's All Wrestling," which talks about the sport is the same no matter what you want to call it. It's really branding. Guys that want to promote their brand of teaching, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or shoot wrestling or catch wrestling or whatever you want to call it. It's all branding. I mean, I think at our gym we just call it submission wrestling, but it's the same sport. The moves are interchangeable, and I think some of the collegiate athletes of today could learn a lot from mixed martial arts, and some of them are training it. I've got a couple college athletes in my wrestling room, training and learning from us, and they're going to use, some of the techniques and the positions that they've developed through their mixed martial arts training or their grappling training into their collegiate careers.
Oh, that's very cool. Now, speaking of people you coached, a lot of us know, some people may not, that Chael Sonnen was one of your first students as a wrestling coach. What was that like, and are you still close with Chael?
Yeah, I'm very close. I mean, we live, nearby each other. He trains at the Team Quest on the other side of town right now. It's a little closer to his house, and he wants to focus more on running his own camps and doing his own training. But I've coached Chael for 20 years, so you develop a pretty close relationship with somebody. It's one of those things. After you've known somebody for 20 years, it's the relationship is very close.
Oh, I could imagine. I could definitely imagine. Now, speaking of Team Quest, one of the Team Quest guys, Tyson Nam, actually just scored a big win this past weekend. Did you hear about that?
Oh, that's right. It was a win. He did a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Always good to see.
Tyson's a really tough fighter. When he first got to my gym, he had that toughness and that ability to stay in the pocket and what he liked to call it was trade. He grew up in Hawaii, and those Hawaiians, as you know, are pretty tough guys. But what I wanted to teach Tyson and what we worked on a lot when he was here with us was, use that toughness, but don't trade with him. The only kind of trade you want to do is you hit him, he misses you. That's a good exchange for an athlete. You don't want to stand in the pocket and take damage if you want to extend your career, if you want to win fights. So hit him, move your feet, get out kind of mentality. And Tyson did a great job in that fight. I saw him when he came forward, was throwing some big shots. Tyson covered, moved out of the way. And the next time he came in, he caught him with that big right hand.
Yeah, that was a beautiful right hand, and I mean, I guess if you gotta take one to give one, that's the way you want it to turn out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Now taking a trip back in the time machine again, you made your MMA debut on Valentine's Day, February 14th, '97. Is it safe to assume that's a holiday you look back on fondly?
I honestly, I didn't even know what day it was. I didn't really try to pay that much attention. My wife probably did because I was gone home celebrating it with her. But if you say the word for it, Valentine's Day, I do remember that tournament because I was so excited to be in there that I actually fought the guy, got a referee stoppage, and the guy complained as we're going back to the center for the official announcement, and he was complaining about the stoppage. So I told him to go back to his corner, and I'll go back to mine. We'll start over. And so we started over the fight twice, and I got a technical knockout twice in one night against the same opponent.
Yeah, I was watching that fight, and I wanted to ask you, and it kind of segues to what I wanted to ask you next, but I was watching that fight and I said, what the hell are the rules in this fight? I mean, they said it was like a 20-minute time limit with a 5-minute overtime round, but like I couldn't see the clock. And then when they first stopped the fight, it looked like you had, gosh, his name was Caro. It looked like you had him in some kind of maybe like an arm in or inside control, and you were just pounding away on him, and they stopped the fight.
I had kind of,
And
I didn't really know what the move was called. I think it's got a name. I think it's called like a mounted crucifix. But at the time, I was just calling it like a schoolyard bully beat down. You know, I put my knees on his arms, held the other one down, and started punching him. But like I said, yeah, I mean the rules were pretty simple: no biting, no eye gouging, and no groin attacks were the rules. And I think it was a 20-minute fight because it was a tournament. So they wanted to keep some time limit in there, but you know I don't know if there were a whole lot of rules. I was definitely getting the victory, but I was so excited to fight and wanted to do it again that I just offered the guy a chance at doing it again.
well, that's a great move on your part as a competitor. And just talking about some of these questionable rules and stuff like that. You and Ray talked a little bit about the split decision against Rampage. Um, you've been in the sport for so long, and I talked a little bit about this with Dean Thomas, and it seems like the sport's rules just kind of change almost unspoken over the years. Have you noticed anything like that? And is there anything you'd like to do to change either refereeing or judging in the sport?
Well, I think the rules have changed a lot throughout the years. I mean, I remember the first time I fought in the UFC, you could knee the head of a grounded opponent. Then the next time I fought in the UFC, Zoof had taken over the company, and it was sanctioned in New Jersey, and they took out the knees and the kicks to the head of the grounded opponent. We touched on that against that Almeida fight, and they changed the rules. They've constantly adapted the rules, and the referees and judges need a little more education. They need to be a little better at it. But as an athlete, your job is to understand how they're judging. What criteria they're looking for, even though it's pretty vague in in their syllabus or their curriculum of what they say. This is what we're looking for: damage, ring control, octagon control, whatever the terminology, the vague terminology they use is. You need to understand how to impress judges in the fights, and sometimes judges they're not really looking. They're not that intelligently looking at what a fight is. And if a guy throws a spinning back kick or something and it lands, even if it doesn't do anything at all, they're ooh, and so are the fans. And so if you do a maneuver that gets the fans to go ooh, the judges are gonna give you on your mark.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. And that's just terrible. We'll see certain fights like perhaps Miguel Torres versus Demetrius Johnson, and sometimes a guy who's on their back offering more active offense or threatening with more submission attempts really does deserve the win. Do you think maybe position to be overrated more?
No, like I said, if you see that, and that's the way judges are doing it, don't put your back on the mat. If you
Yeah,
see more guys losing fights because they had their back on the mat, regardless of threatening submission attacks or they're doing damage, learn as a professional athlete in the industry that's probably not where you want to be. Don't try to change the rules and deal with the way that they're judging and move forward.
yeah, that definitely seems the best way. Well, I know Ray wanted to get back with you. Ray, you got anything else here for Matt?
Just want to we're going to wrap things up. Just want to say a big thank you, Matt, for coming on the show, and also give you a chance to shout out if you wanted to shout out any friends, family, let people know how they can follow you on Twitter and Facebook, and obviously let them know about your site and your podcast as well.
I think on that, and it's CoachMattLindland.com. You can get my podcast, Inside Coaching, right from the website, or we just got accepted onto iTunes as well. So we're going to start downloading those, and I've got my next guest is Jonathan Snowden this week. Just check out CoachMattLindland.com, and you can follow me at Twitter, and that's MattLindland Twitter, Facebook, and of course, if you're interested in finding out more about Team Quest and what we got going on, go to tqmma.com and check out Team Quest and look at our Fit Quest program. We feel like we've developed the best fitness sports-specific program in the world. If anybody out there wants to, use those workouts of the day for their gym or you personally, go ahead. We upload the workouts every day of what we're doing. If you don't understand them, email at info at Team Quest right there off the website. We'll explain it to you. A lot of those we put videos up to. So we're putting a lot of content out there with our writing, with my writing. I'm Coach Matt Lindland, and we're putting a lot of videos up. Some are tutorials, and some are just highlights of our fitness program. I think the highlight one is the first one you come to on our website.
Well, that's brilliant. What I'll probably do is I'll post some links on our site as well, so they can click off the podcast to come onto your site as well. So we'll thank you very much for being on the show, Matt, and we wish you obviously all the success with your podcast and your site.
You bet. And DirtyBoxer.com is our apparel company.
Cool. So we'll see if we can get some links up to that as well. So DirtyBoxer.com.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Take care.
Right, that's Matt Lindland. We had a few internet problems there, but I think other than that, the interview went really, really well. So we thank Matt for being on the show. Are you still there, Patrick?
Yep, I'm still here, Ray. Yeah, it did seem like we had a little bit of an issue with the internet there, but I think